The morning sun of Zilani Prime cast strange purple shadows across the diplomatic compound as Lieutenant Jake Morrison checked his equipment one final time. The alien world's twin suns created an eerie but beautiful light that made everything look like a dream. Jake had been chosen for this mission because of his work with alien biology, but nothing had prepared him for actually being here. "Remember Morrison?" Captain Lisa Grant said as she walked past his station. "We're guests here. The Zilani have never allowed another species on their homeworld before. Everything we do matters." Jake nodded and secured his medical kit to his belt. As the mission's xenobiologist, his job was to study the local life forms and make sure nothing dangerous got too close to the human delegation. The Zilani had warned them about some aggressive wildlife in the area, but they seemed confident their security measures would keep everyone safe. The diplomatic compound sat on a hill overlooking the Zilani capital city. The buildings below looked like giant crystals growing from the ground, all curves and flowing lines that seemed to dance in the purple light. Jake had been on 3 other worlds before, but none as beautiful as this one. The Zilani themselves were just as impressive as their architecture. They stood about 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in certain light. Their faces were almost human but more angular, with large dark eyes that missed nothing. Most striking were the delicate patterns that covered their skin like tattoos, but Jake had learned these were natural markings that showed their family lines and social status. The formal meeting started in 2 hours. Dr. Amy Carter, the team's cultural specialist, reminded everyone over the CUM system. "Until then, stay close to the compound. The Zilani have given us free access to the immediate area, but don't wander off." Jake was studying some local plant samples when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a scream, high and filled with terror. Without thinking, he grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the sound. The scream had come from beyond a small grove of trees at the edge of the compound. Jake pushed through the strange silver-leafed branches and found himself in a small clearing. What he saw there made him freeze for just a moment. A young Zilani female was backed against a large rock, her arms raised to protect herself from 3 creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and lizards. Each beast was about the size of a large dog, with scales that changed color as they moved and teeth that gleamed like metal in the purple sunlight. They were circling her, making low growling sounds that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Female was clearly injured. Jake could see purple blood on her left arm and leg. Her clothes were torn and she was breathing hard from fear and pain. She spotted Jake and called out something in her own language, but he didn't need translation to understand she was asking for help. Jake's training kicked in. He had studied these creatures in the mission briefings. They were called Vashtar by the Zilani, and they were pack hunters known for their aggressive behavior during mating season. The report said they usually avoided areas with Zilani scent markers, but something must have gone wrong. Without hesitation, Jake pulled out his sonic deterrent device and activated it. The high-frequency sound made the creatures stop and turn toward him. Their color-changing scales shifted to angry reds and oranges as they decided whether this new threat was worth attacking. Jake slowly moved between the injured Zilani and the Vashtar, keeping the sonic device pointed at them. "Easy," he said, in a calm voice, even though his heart was racing. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." The largest of the 3 creatures took a step toward Jake, its scales now flashing bright red. Jake increased the sonic frequency, and the beast stopped, shaking its head in obvious discomfort. The other 2 began to back away, but the leader seemed determined to fight. Jake reached into his kit and pulled out a flashbang grenade, designed for exactly this kind of situation. "Last warning," he said to the creature, then activated the device and threw it to the side of the clearing. The explosion of light and sound sent all 3 Vashtar running back into the forest. Jake waited until he was sure they were gone before turning to help the injured Zilani. She had slumped against the rock, clearly in shock from blood loss and fear. Jake knelt beside her and opened his medical kit. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm here to help." Her large dark eyes looked up at him with a mixture of pain and something else he couldn't identify. She said something in her language that sounded like gratitude. Then winced as Jake began examining her wounds. The cuts on her arm and leg were deep, but not life-threatening. Jake cleaned them with antiseptic and applied pressure bandages to stop the bleeding. The Zilani medical briefings had been very thorough, and he was relieved to find that human medical supplies worked well on Zilani physiology. "What's your name?" Jake asked as he worked. He knew some basic Zilani phrases from his preparation for the mission. "Kira," she replied in accented but clear English. "You are a human diplomat?" "I'm Jake Morrison," he said, finishing with her arm wound.
Oh.
"I'm part of the human team, but I'm a scientist, not a diplomat." "Can you tell me what happened?" Kira's voice was weak but steady. "I was walking to gather samples of the silver leaves for my research. The Vashtar must have been driven from their normal territory by the rains. They do not usually come so close to the city." Jake applied a healing patch to her leg wound. The human medical technology would help her body repair itself much faster than natural healing. "You're a scientist too?" She nodded. "I study plant biology. My family wanted me to observe the human delegation from a distance to learn about your species." She paused and looked directly at him. "They'll be very interested to hear what I have learned." Jake helped her stand up, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her. "Can you walk? I should get you back to the compound and let both our medical teams check you over." "Yes, I can walk," Kira said, but Jake noticed she was still shaky. He kept his arm around her as they made their way back through the grove of trees, as they emerged into the open area of the compound. Jake saw that their little adventure had not gone unnoticed. Several Zilani officials had gathered near the edge of the human camp along with Captain Grant and other members of the human team. They all watched as Jake helped Kira across the clearing. The Zilani delegation immediately surrounded them, speaking rapidly in their own language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but their tones seemed urgent and excited. One of the older Zilani, wearing elaborate markings that indicated high rank, stepped forward and said something to Kira. She replied at length, gesturing toward Jake several times. The elder Zilani's eyes widened, and he looked at Jake with what seemed like amazement and respect. "What's going on?" Captain Grant asked as she approached. "We heard the sonic deterrent and saw the flashbang explosion," Jake quickly explained. What had happened while a Zilani medic examined Kira's injuries? The captain listened with growing concern and relief. "You did the right thing, Morrison," she said when he finished. "Though next time, call for backup before running off to fight alien wildlife." The elder Zilani stepped forward and spoke in careful English. "Captain Grant, your subordinate has performed a great service for our people. Young Kira is the daughter of one of our most respected scientists. Her loss would have been a tragedy for both our species." "Jake was just doing what any decent person would do," the captain replied. "We're glad he could help." The elder Zilani exchanged glances with the other officials, and Jake noticed they seemed to be having some kind of silent conversation. Finally, the elder nodded and turned back to the humans. "We must inform our council of this event," he said formally. "Lieutenant Morrison's actions today will be remembered with great honor." As the Zilani delegation prepared to leave, Kira approached. "Jake, one more time?" "Thank you," she said simply. "You risked your life for someone you did not know. This means much to my people." Jake smiled. "I just did what felt right. I hope your injuries heal quickly." She touched her hand to her heart in what Jake assumed was a Zilani gesture of respect, then joined her people as they headed back toward the city. Captain Grant watched them go, then turned to Jake. "Nice work, Morrison. That kind of quick thinking is exactly why you're on this team."
Oh, let's get ready for the formal meetings.
"After this morning, I have a feeling the negotiations are going to go very well." Jake nodded and headed back to his quarters to clean up and prepare for the diplomatic sessions. He had no idea that his simple act of heroism had just changed his life forever. 3 months had passed since the successful diplomatic mission to Zilani Prime. Jake Morrison still couldn't believe his luck. He had been promoted to senior lieutenant and given the assignment he had always dreamed of, permanent human liaison. To the Zilani homeworld, the promotion had come as a complete surprise, especially since there were officers with more experience who seemed like better choices for such an important position. "I still don't understand why they picked me," Jake had told Captain Grant before leaving Earth. Commander Phillips has been doing diplomatic work for 15 years. Sometimes the right person for a job isn't the most obvious choice, she had replied with a knowing smile. The Zilani specifically requested you for this position. After what you did for that young scientist, they trust you. Jake stood on the balcony of his new quarters in the Zilani capital city, watching the morning light dance across the crystal buildings below. His apartment was far more luxurious than anything he had expected. The rooms were spacious and filled with beautiful furniture that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. The view overlooked the city's central garden, where Zilani families gathered each morning to share their traditional breakfast meal. What puzzled Jake most was how the Zilani treated him. Everywhere he went, they showed him unusual respect. Shopkeepers refused to let him pay for items. Restaurant owners insisted on serving him their finest meals, and officials he had never met greeted him by name on the street. It was flattering but confusing. His door chimed with the musical tone that announced visitors. Jake opened it to find Kira standing in the hallway, carrying a basket covered with a cloth that smelled of spices and fresh bread. "Good morning, Jake," she said with a smile. "I brought you breakfast." This had become a daily routine since his arrival. Every morning, Kira appeared with food, and every morning Jake invited her in to share the meal. He enjoyed her company and had learned a great deal about Zilani culture from their conversations. "You don't have to keep doing this," Jake said as he set plates on the small table by his window. "I can use the food dispenser or eat at one of the cafes." "It is no trouble," Kira replied, uncovering the basket to reveal warm pastries filled with sweet fruit and containers of the rich, dark beverage that served as the Zilani equivalent of coffee. "Besides, I enjoy our morning talks." Jake had noticed that Kira's English had improved dramatically over the past 3 months. She now spoke almost without accent and used complex sentence structures that showed she had been studying very hard. "How's your research going?" Jake asked as they sat down to eat. "Very well. The plant samples you helped me gather that first. They have led to some interesting discoveries. My supervisor says my work might be published in the Central Science Journal." She paused and looked at him with those large dark eyes. "I could not have done it without your help." "I barely did anything," Jake said, waving off her thanks. "You're the one doing all the hard work." Kira smiled, but didn't argue. Jake had noticed. She often accepted his compliments with quiet grace rather than the protests he might expect from a human colleague as they ate. Jake told her about his work documenting the local wildlife and his meetings with various Zilani officials. The liaison position was more interesting than he had expected. Rather than just serving as a translator between species, he was helping to plan joint research projects and cultural exchange programs. "The Council wants to establish a permanent research station on one of your colony worlds," Jake explained. "They're particularly interested in studying how Earth plants adapt to different soil conditions." "That would be wonderful," Kira said. "Perhaps I could be part of that mission." Jake noticed how her eyes lit up at the possibility. "I'm sure they'd be happy to have someone with your expertise." After breakfast, Kira helped Jake clear the dishes, and they walked together toward the government complex where Jake's office was located. As they moved through the streets, Jake continued to notice the strange behavior of other Zilani. Male Zilani, who had been friendly to him before, would see Kira and immediately change direction to avoid walking near them. When Jake greeted these acquaintances, they responded politely, but seemed uncomfortable. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked. Kira, after the 5th Zilani male crossed the street to avoid them. "People seem to be acting strangely around us." Kira's skin patterns shifted slightly, which Jake had learned was a sign of emotion, though he wasn't sure which emotion. "They are showing proper respect," she said simply. "Respect for what?" She paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Our special relationship." Jake assumed she meant their friendship and the fact that he had saved her life. It made sense that the other Zilani would respect that bond, though avoiding them entirely seemed excessive at the government complex. Jake attended his daily briefing with the Zilani officials. The meeting went smoothly, as they usually did. Jake had noticed that the Zilani seemed to agree with most of his suggestions lately. even when he proposed ideas that seemed like they might face resistance. "We believe your proposal for the joint agricultural project is excellent," said Elder Vosh, the senior council member Jake worked with most often. "We will begin preparations immediately." "Thank you, but are you sure the timeline isn't too aggressive?" Jake asked. "We're talking about a major commitment of resources from both our peoples." "Time is not a concern when the cause is worthy," Elder Vosh replied. "Besides, any project you propose carries great weight with our people." Jake was pleased but puzzled by their confidence in his judgment. He had been honest about his limited experience with large-scale diplomatic projects, but they seemed to trust him completely. After the meeting, Jake returned to his office to work on reports for Earth Command. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice Kira enter until she placed a cup of the spiced tea she knew he liked on his desk. "You work too hard," she said gently. "Just trying to keep up with everything," Jake replied, looking up from his computer screen. "Sometimes I feel like I'm in over my head with this job." "You are exactly where you belong," Kira said, with such conviction that Jake looked at her in surprise. "How can you be so sure?" Kira sat in the chair across from his desk. "My people have a saying, the heart knows its path before the mind sees the destination. You were meant to be here. Everything that has happened proves this." "I just did what anyone would have done that day in the forest," Jake said. "No," Kira replied firmly. "Not anyone would have risked their life for a stranger. Not anyone would have acted without thinking of personal cost. That is why my people honor you so greatly." Jake was touched by her words, but still felt like he was missing something important. "Speaking of honor, I keep hearing people use a word when they talk about me. It sounds like Shen something. Do you know what that means?" Kira's skin pattern shifted again, more dramatically this time. "Shen Kalar," she said softly. "It means ... honored protector. Protector of what?" "Of..." Kira hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Of those who matter most to you." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Elder Vosh appeared in the doorway. "Lieutenant Morrison, forgive the interruption, but we have received word from your Earth Command. They are sending a cultural specialist to observe our cooperation protocols." "A cultural specialist?" Jake asked. "Did they say why?" "They wish to document our successful partnership for future diplomatic missions," Elder Vosh explained. "The specialist will arrive next week." After Elder Vosh left, Jake turned back to Kira, but she was gathering her things to leave. "Let you return to your work," she said. "Kira, wait. I wanted to ask you about something else I've noticed. Why do your relatives keep inviting me to family gatherings? And why do they ask my opinion about decisions that seem very personal?" Kira paused at the doorway. "Because your thoughts matter to our family now. Because you are." She struggled with the words, "because you are important to us." To me, the way she said it made Jake's heart skip a beat. There was something in her voice that suggested deeper feelings than simple friendship or gratitude. "Kira, I must go," she said quickly. "My supervisor expects my research report by sunset." After she left, Jake sat alone in his office, thinking about all the strange things he had noticed. The excessive respect from other Zilani, the way males avoided Kira when she was with him. The family invitations, the way officials seemed to give extra weight to his opinions. There was a pattern here that he couldn't quite grasp out. He pulled up the cultural database on his computer and began searching for information about Zilani's social customs. Most of what he found was basic information he already knew, but then he came across a reference to something called Shenter Vel Nura, ancient bonding traditions. The file was marked as restricted, requiring special clearance to access. Jake frowned. Why would information about cultural traditions be classified? He made a note to ask about it during his next briefing. That evening, as Jake walked home through the city streets, he noticed more of the strange behavior. Zilani couples would see him coming, and the males would nod respectfully. While guiding their female companions to the other side of the street, shopkeepers continued to refuse payment for items, and several offered him gifts for his household. Dr. Amy Carter arrived on Zilani Prime with the efficiency that had made her famous throughout the diplomatic corps.
Oh.
Jake met her at the transport station, relieved to see a familiar face from his time on Earth. Amy was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had studied more alien cultures than anyone else in human space. "Good to see you again, Jake," Amy said as they walked toward the government complex, though I have to admit, this assignment puzzles me. Earth's command sent me to study your successful integration with Zilani Society, but they were very vague about what exactly I'm supposed to document. Maybe they just want to understand why things are going so well here, Jake suggested. The Zilani have been incredibly cooperative with every proposal I've made. Amy stopped walking and stared at him. Every proposal? Jake, that's not normal. Even the friendliest alien cultures push back on some requests. It's how negotiation works. They continued toward Jake's office, but Amy spent most of the walk observing, rather than talking. Jake noticed her watching the way other Zilani interacted with him. When a shopkeeper tried to give Jake a free meal, Amy's eyebrows went up. When a group of Zilani males crossed the street to avoid walking near them, she made a note on her tablet. "Jake," Amy said carefully, "have you noticed anything unusual about how the Zilani treat you?" "They're very respectful," Jake said. "Think they appreciate what I did for Kira." "Who is Kira?" Jake explained about the rescue and how Kira had become his friend over the past few months. As he talked, Amy's expression grew more and more concerned. "She brings you breakfast every day. She's just being nice. The Zilani are very hospitable people. And she spends time with you regularly, alone? We're friends. We talk about science and culture. She's been helping me understand Zilani society." Amy made more notes. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Have you participated in any ceremonies since you've been here? Any formal events where you exchanged gifts or made promises?" Jake thought back over the past few months. "There was a cultural exchange ceremony about 2 months ago. The council asked me to participate as a representative of humanity. One exchanged some symbolic gifts with various Zilani officials, including Kira. We made formal declarations about cooperation between our peoples." Amy stopped walking again. "What kind of gifts?" "Traditional items from both cultures," I gave Kira. "A crystal from Earth, and she gave me a pendant made from Zilani silver. We both made promises to honor and protect our friendship and the bond between our peoples." "Jake," Amy said slowly, "do you remember the exact words you spoke?" "Not exactly. The translator was converting everything. I said something about promising to care for her welfare and protect her from harm, and she made similar promises to me. It was all very formal and ceremonial." Amy's face had gone pale. "Jake, I need to speak with some Zilani elders immediately. Don't make any more formal commitments or participate in any ceremonies until I get back to you." Before Jake could ask what was wrong, Amy hurried away toward the council building. Jake spent the rest of the day wondering what had upset her so much. The cultural exchange ceremony had seemed perfectly normal to him. That evening, Amy came to Jake's apartment, looking grim. She arrived just as Kira was bringing dinner, and Jake noticed how carefully Amy watched their interaction. "Jake, we need to talk privately," Amy said after Kira left. "What's going on? You've been acting strange all day." Amy sat down heavily in one of his chairs. "Jake, I've spent the day talking to Zilani elders, studying their cultural records, and reviewing legal documents. I have some very difficult news for you." "What kind of news?" "You're married?" Jake laughed. "What are you talking about? I'm not married to anyone. According to Zilani law and custom, you are married to Kira." The laughter died in Jake's throat. "That's impossible. I would know if I was married." Amy pulled out her tablet and showed him her notes. "When you saved Kira's life, you triggered an ancient Zilani law called Shenter Vel Nira. Life debt becomes life bond. By voluntarily risking your life to save hers, you created a sacred bond that Zilani society recognizes as marriage." Stared at her, but nobody told me that. "The Zilani assumed you knew. In their culture, the bond is so fundamental that they couldn't imagine someone not understanding it. They thought you saved her because you wanted to marry her in the ceremony. That was your wedding confirmation? When you exchanged gifts and made promises to care for each other, you formally accepted the marriage bond in front of witnesses." Felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "This can't be legal. I never consented to marriage. According to Earth law, you're right." But according to Zilani law, your consent was given when you chose to save her life. Act of rescue as a marriage proposal, and your participation in the ceremony as accepting her response. Jake stood up and began pacing around the room. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't Kira explain? I asked her about that, Amy said gently. She said she assumed you understood and were choosing to court her in the traditional way. She's been waiting for you to acknowledge the marriage openly. We're not even the same species. Zilani law doesn't distinguish between species when it comes to life bonds. They believe that anyone willing to die for another person must feel the deepest possible connection to them. Jake sank back into his chair. What does this mean for my position here, for the diplomatic relations? Amy's expression grew even more serious. That's the real problem, Jake. I've been in contact with Earth Command. They're sending Commander Steve Walsh to handle this situation. Handle it how? They consider this a violation of your human rights. They're demanding that the Zilani release you from the marriage bond. And if they refuse, then Earth Command is prepared to end all diplomatic relations with the Zilani. Jake felt sick. So I've accidentally created a diplomatic crisis. Gets worse, Amy continued. I spoke with the Zilani Council today. They're just as upset as Earth Command, but for different reasons. They see the marriage bond as sacred. To break it without proper cause would be the greatest insult possible to their culture. What constitutes proper cause? It's the only way to break a life bond is if the person who created it formally declares that they acted from selfish motives rather than genuine care. Essentially, you would have to say that you saved Kira for personal gain, not because you cared about her welfare. Jake thought about Kira's face when she brought him breakfast each morning. The way she lit up when they talked about their work, her obvious affection for him. And if I do that, it would be branded as dishonorable in Zilani society, banned from their world forever, and all diplomatic relations would end anyway. So either way, I destroy the relationship between our peoples. It looks that way. Jake put his head in his hands. How did trying to help someone turn into such a disaster? Amy moved to sit beside him. Jake, there's something else you need to know. I spent time observing Kira today, and I talked with her about human customs and her feelings about this situation. What did she say? She's genuinely fond of you, Jake, maybe more than fond. She's learned to speak English fluently because she wanted to communicate better with you. She studied human culture extensively. This isn't just obligation to her. But she's only interested because of some law that says we have to be married. I don't think so. She told me that if you want to be released from the bond, she go through with the ceremony to free you, even though it would hurt her deeply. Jake looked up. She would do that. She said your happiness matters more to her than tradition. But Jake, you need to understand what that would mean for her. If you declare that you saved her for selfish reasons, it doesn't just free you. It also marks her as someone whose life wasn't worth saving out of genuine care. In Zilani society, that's a terrible shame for her and her family. So if I try to get out of this marriage, I destroy her reputation and end the diplomatic relationship. Yes, and if I stay married to her, I've been forced into a relationship I never chose. That's one way to look at it. Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked Amy, do you think it's possible for two different species to have a real relationship? Not just because of laws or obligations, but because they genuinely care about each other. I've seen it happen, Amy said. Not often, but yes. The question is whether you're willing to find out if what you and Kira have could grow into something real. How can I know if my feelings are genuine when I've been manipulated into this situation? Jake, let me ask you something. How do you feel when you see Kira each morning? When she smiles at you or when you make her laugh? Jake thought about it. Honestly, happy, comfortable, like she makes everything better just by being there. And how do you feel about the idea of never seeing her again? The question hit Jake like a physical blow. Terrible. Empty. Then maybe the question isn't whether you were tricked into marriage. Maybe the question is whether you want to choose it now with full knowledge of what it means. Jake looked out his window at the crystal city below. Somewhere out there, Kira was probably wondering why he had seemed so distant when Amy arrived. Tomorrow, Commander Walsh would arrive to demand his freedom. Jake found Kira in the research gardens behind the government complex, sitting alone on a bench beneath one of the silver-leafed trees they had first met near. The evening light made her blue skin seem to glow, and her natural markings were showing. The deep purple patterns that Jake had learned meant sadness or worry. "Kira," he called softly. She looked up and Jake could see that she had been crying. Zilani tears were clear like human tears, but they left faint silver traces on their skin. "Hello, Jake. I was not expecting to see you tonight." Jake sat down. Beside her, close enough to talk privately, but far enough away to be respectful, "We need to discuss something important about us." Kira's markings shifted to an even deeper purple. "The human cultural specialist told you about the life bond?" "Yes, she did. I thought she might." Humans seem to need everything explained clearly. Kira looked down at her hands. "I am sorry, Jake. I should have told you myself when you first arrived." "Why didn't you?" "Because I hoped you understood and were choosing to honor the bond slowly in your own way. I thought perhaps humans needed more time to accept such connections." She looked at him with those large, dark eyes. "I did not want to pressure you." Jake felt a twist of guilt. "Kira, I had no idea about any of this. In human culture, marriage is something that people choose together after they get to know each other. We don't have automatic bonds based on rescue." "I know that now. Dr. Carter explained human mating customs to me today. They are very different from ours." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the lights come on in the city below. Finally, Jake asked the question that had been eating at him all day. "Kira, how do you really feel about this situation? Not about the law or tradition, but about your own feelings." Kira was quiet for so long that Jake wondered if she would answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "When you saved me from the Vashtar, I felt something I had never felt before. Not just gratitude, but a sense of connection, like you and I were meant to find each other. Over these past months, those feelings have grown stronger." "What kind of feelings?" "I look forward to our morning talks more than anything else in my day. When you smile at something I have said, it makes me happier than any scientific discovery I have made. When you are away on trips to the outer settlements, I count the days until you return." She paused and looked at him directly. "I believe humans would call this love." Jake felt his heart racing. "But how can you be sure your feelings are real and not just because of the life bond law?" "Because I have spent many hours thinking about exactly that question," Kira said. "Before you came to our world, I had never been interested in bonding with anyone. My family worried that I cared only about my research and would never find a mate. But with you, everything feels different." "Different how?" "When I'm with you, I feel like I can be completely myself. If you listen to my ideas about plant biology with the same respect you show to important diplomatic matters, if you ask thoughtful questions and remember details from conversations we had weeks ago, you make me laugh with your stories about Earth customs." Kira's markings had shifted to a lighter shade, showing more positive emotions. "You treat me as an equal, not as someone you are obligated to care for." Jake realized she was right. Relationship had felt natural and comfortable from the beginning, but don't you want to choose your own partner? Someone from your own species who understands your culture? "I am choosing," Kira said firmly. "That is what I am trying to tell. You, the life bond may have brought us together, but my feelings for you are my own choice." "What about the differences between our species? The problems that could cause?" Kira smiled for the first time that evening. "Jake, did you know that there are already 17 bonded pairs between humans and Zilani on various worlds? The life bond is not common, but cross-species relationships are not unknown to us." "I didn't know that." "Dr. Carter told me that human Zilani couples have been successful when both partners are willing to learn and compromise. We have more in common than you might think." Jake thought about their morning conversations, the way they worked together. On research projects, how comfortable they felt with each other. "Kira, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." "Of course." "If I ask you to release me from the life bond, will you do it?" Kira's markings shifted back to purple, but she nodded. "Yes, if that is what you truly want. even though it would hurt you? Your happiness matters more to me than my own feelings. And what would happen to you if we went through with that ceremony? Kira was quiet for a moment. It would mark me as someone whose life was not worth genuine care. In our society, that is a shame that follows a person and their family for generations. My parents would be dishonored, and I would likely never be chosen for another life bond. Jake felt sick. So if I try to get free, I destroy your future. You would not be destroying anything, Kira said gently. You would simply be making a choice about your own life. I cannot ask you to stay bonded to me out of pity or obligation. What if it wasn't pity or obligation? What if I stayed because I wanted to? Kira looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? Jake took a deep breath. Kira, I've been thinking about my feelings too. When Amy told me about the life bond, my first reaction was anger about being tricked. But then I started thinking about what it would mean to lose you. And the idea of leaving this world and never seeing you again made me feel empty inside. These past 3 months have been the happiest of my life, and most of that happiness came from spending time with you. Kira's markings began to show flecks of gold, which Jake had learned indicated hope. I don't know if what I feel is love yet, Jake continued, but I know I care about you deeply. I know that you've become the most important person in my life, and I know that I want the chance to find out if what we have could become something even stronger. Every relationship faces challenges. At least we would be facing them together. Kira reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm and soft, and Jake realized this was the first time they had touched since that day in the forest. Jake, there is something else you should know about the life bond before you make your decision. What? It is not just a marriage contract. It is a partnership in the deepest sense. Bonded pairs share responsibilities, make decisions together, and support each other's goals and dreams. If you accept the bond, I would support your diplomatic career and any assignments that might take you to other worlds. And I would support your scientific research and any opportunities you want to pursue. We would be partners in everything. Jake thought about the kind of relationship Kira was describing. It sounded like something deeper and more meaningful than many human marriages he had observed. Kira, if we decide to make this bond real, not because of law or obligation, but because we choose it, how would that work? Would we have a human-style courtship? A Zilani bonding ceremony? Something new? We could create our own traditions, Kira said with growing excitement. We could take the best parts of both cultures and build something that belongs to us. Before Jake could respond, his communicator chimed with an urgent message. Commander Walsh had arrived and was demanding an immediate meeting with Jake and the Zilani Council. The commander from Earth is here, Jake said. Tomorrow, he's going to demand that the Zilani release me from the life bond. And what will you tell him? Jake looked at Kira, at the hope in her eyes, and the genuine affection in her expression. He thought about their morning conversations, the way she made him laugh, how natural it felt to share his thoughts and dreams with her. I'm going to tell him that I'm not a victim who needs rescuing, Jake said firmly. I'm going to tell him that I'm a grown man capable of making my own decisions about my life and my relationships, even if it means defying Earth's command. Even if it means that. Kira squeezed his hand. And what decision will you make? Jake looked into her eyes and saw not just hope, but strength, intelligence, and genuine love. I think you know what I'm going to choose. I hope I do. But I want to hear you say it. Kira, I choose you. I choose us. I choose to make this bond real and meaningful, not because I have to, but because I want to build a life with you. The gold flecks in Kira's markings spread until her entire skin seemed to shimmer with joy, even knowing it will be difficult. Even knowing that others might not understand. Especially because of that, Jake said. The best things in life are worth fighting for. Kira leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. A gesture Jake had learned was how Zilani showed deep affection. Then tomorrow, when your commander demands your freedom, we will face him together. Together, Jake agreed as they sat in the growing darkness. Jake felt a sense of peace he had not experienced since Amy first told him about the life bond. He was no longer a victim of circumstance or cultural misunderstanding. He was a man who had found something precious and was willing to fight to keep it. Tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight, Jake and Kira began planning the life they would build together. Commander Steve Walsh was exactly what Jake had expected. Tall, stern, and completely convinced that he was there to rescue Jake from an impossible situation. The meeting was held in the main council chamber, with Elder Vosh and 5 other senior Zilani officials on one side of the room, and Walsh with 2 Earth Command representatives on the other. Jake sat in the middle with Amy and Kira beside him. Lieutenant Morrison Walsh began without any preliminary pleasantries. Earth Command has reviewed your situation and determined that you have been subjected to cultural coercion. We are here to secure your immediate release from this forced marriage arrangement. With respect, Commander, Jake said calmly. Nobody forced me into anything. Walsh's eyebrows went up. Morrison, you were tricked into a marriage contract without your knowledge or consent. That constitutes coercion under Earth law. But we're not on Earth, sir. We're on Zilani Prime, and I'm here as a diplomatic representative. My job is to understand and work within Zilani culture, not to impose Earth customs on them.
Elder.
Vosh leaned forward. Commander Walsh, we deeply regret that Lieutenant Morrison was not informed of our customs before the life bond was created. However, the bond itself is sacred to our people. To break it without proper cause would dishonor both our species. Cultural practices don't override human rights, Walsh replied sharply. Lieutenant Morrison has the right to choose his own relationships without interference from alien laws. I agree completely, Jake said, surprising everyone in the room. I do have the right to choose my own relationships. That's exactly what I'm doing. Walsh stared at him. What are you talking about? Jake stood up and took Kira's hand. Commander, I'm choosing to honor the life bond with Kira not because I'm forced to, but because I want to. Morrison, you're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome or some kind of cultural conditioning. You can't possibly make a rational decision in this situation. Sir, I've been thinking about this decision for days. I've talked extensively with Dr. Carter about the implications. I've discussed it honestly with Kira. I know exactly what I'm choosing and why. Amy spoke up from her seat. Commander, I've observed Lieutenant Morrison carefully since I arrived. His decision appears to be based on genuine feelings, not coercion or conditioning. Walsh turned to her with obvious frustration. Dr. Carter, you were sent here to document cultural practices, not to support this nonsense. I was sent here to understand what was happening, Amy replied firmly. What I've found is a successful cross-cultural relationship that has strengthened diplomatic ties between our species. It's not a relationship, it's a trap. Jake felt his temper rising. Commander, with all due respect, you've been on this world for less than 24 hours. I've been living here for 3 months. I think I'm in a better position to judge my own feelings and situation. You think you're in love with an alien? I know I care deeply about someone who happens to be from a different species, Jake corrected. And yes, I believe that could grow into love if we're given the chance. Elder Vash stood up. Commander Walsh, perhaps you do not understand what the life bond means to our people. It is not slavery or ownership. It is a partnership of equals, who have chosen to support each other through all of life's challenges. It's a primitive custom that has no place in modern interstellar relations. The insult hit the Zilani delegation like a physical blow. Jake could see their skin markings, darkening with anger. Even Kira, who had remained calm throughout the meeting, showed flashes of red in her patterns. Commander, Jake said dangerously, you're a guest in their home. I suggest you show proper respect for their culture. I'm here to protect Earth's interests and the rights of Earth's citizens. That includes protecting you from making a decision that could ruin your career and your life. My career is going very well, actually. Zilani trusts me. Our diplomatic relations are stronger than ever. I'm doing work that I find meaningful and important. Until this marriage nonsense destroys everything you've built. Jake looked around the room at the faces of people from both species who had become important to him over the past months. Then he looked at Kira, who was watching him with complete trust in her eyes. Commander Walsh, Jake said formally, I am respectfully declining Earth. Command's offer to dissolve my life bond with Kira. I am choosing to remain on Zilani Prime as the human liaison. And I am choosing to build a life with my partner. Walsh's face turned red. Morrison, I'm ordering you to return to Earth immediately. Sir, you can't order me to abandon a legal marriage recognized by the government I'm assigned to work with. It's not a legal marriage under Earth law. But it is legal under Zilani law, and I'm living under Zilani jurisdiction as part of my diplomatic assignment. Amy cleared her throat. Commander, I should point out that Earth Command's own regulations state that diplomatic personnel operating under long-term assignments have the right to establish permanent residency and family relationships on their assigned worlds. Walsh spun around to face her. That regulation applies to normal marriage situations. The regulation doesn't specify human marriages only, Amy said calmly. It refers to legal family relationships recognized by the host government, Elder. Vosh nodded. The life bond between Lieutenant Morrison and Kira is fully recognized under our laws. They have all the rights and responsibilities of any bonded pair in our society. This is ridiculous, Walsh snapped. Morrison, think about what you're throwing away. Your career with Earth Command, your chance to serve on other worlds, your connections with your own species. I'm not throwing anything away, Jake replied. I'm choosing to build something new. For the record, Kira and I have discussed this. If my work requires travel to other worlds, she'll come with me. Right. If her research takes her to Earth or the colonies, I'll support her career as well. Kira spoke for the first time since the meeting began. Commander Walsh, I understand your concern for Lieutenant Morrison's welfare. But I must ask you to consider that your assumption that marriage, to me, would harm him is insulting to both our species. I didn't mean to imply, you implied that I am not worthy of being his partner, that my culture is primitive, and that our relationship is somehow degrading to him. These implications suggest that humans consider themselves superior to Zilani. Hey, Walsh looked uncomfortable. That's not what I meant. Then perhaps you should consider that Lieutenant Morrison has found happiness and success here. Why do you wish to take that away from him? Jake squeezed Kira's hand. Commander, I appreciate Earth Command's concern for my welfare, but I'm asking you to trust my judgment. I've found something here that I don't want to lose. And what if it doesn't work out? What if you regret this decision? Then I'll deal with the consequences like any adult in any relationship. But I'd rather try and fail than spend my life wondering what might have been. Elder Vash stood again. Commander Walsh, if Earth's Command cannot accept Lieutenant Morrison's choice, we will respect his decision to resign from your service and remain here as a permanent resident of our world. You'd give up your Earth citizenship? Jake in shock. I'd rather not, Jake said honestly. But if that's what it takes to stay with Kira and continue the work we're doing here, then yes. The room fell silent for several long moments. Finally, Walsh sat back in his chair with obvious defeat. Morrison, if I allow this, there will be conditions. Regular reports to Earth Command. Periodic visits from cultural specialists to monitor the situation. And if there's any sign that you're being coerced or manipulated, you'll have my full cooperation with any reasonable oversight, Jake said quickly. And the Zilani government will provide complete transparency regarding the life bond laws and customs. Elder Vosh added. Walsh looked around the room one more time, then sighed. Against my better judgment, I'll recommend to Earth Command that we recognize this arrangement as a legal diplomatic marriage. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet. You're going to face challenges you can't even imagine. Cross-species relationships are complicated under the best circumstances. We understand that, Kira said. But we also believe that understanding between our peoples is worth whatever difficulties we might face. 3 months later, Jake and Kira stood before a mixed gathering of humans and Zilani in the same garden where they had first talked, honestly about their feelings. The ceremony they had created combined traditions from both cultures, human vows of love and commitment mixed with Zilani. Rituals of partnership and mutual support. Jake wore formal Earth's diplomatic dress with a Zilani pendant that marked him. As life-bonded, Kira wore traditional Zilani bonding robes with a crystal from Earth that Jake had given her during their first ceremony. Today we're not just joining two people, Jake said as he looked out at the crowd. We're joining two ways of life, two cultures, two species that are learning to build something new together. The life bond brought us together, Kira added, but love and choice keep us together. As they exchanged their final vows, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the forest. Had come to Zilani Prime as a simple scientist hoping to study alien life. Instead, he had found a partner, a home, and a purpose that bridged two worlds.